in a particular format or whatever, it's never, you're not really going to say very much, right? And the point, again, of blues is to use the language of the blues in an interesting and creative way, that the same as great poets use the same language that we all use, but put the words together in a really interesting and beautiful way. Okay, so that you want to remember that. So I always think it's a good idea with licks to practice licks individually, and it's something I still do. I'm still a lick collector. When I'm listening to music, blues music particularly, and I'll hear like something will just grab my ear. I'll be like, oh, that phrase, I love that. Some connection with the music happens with particular phrases, particular words that I want to assimilate into my own vocabulary. So I feel a little, I use the notes function in my iPhone, and I'll just make a note of the track and roughly where the time was, where I heard that particular phrase. And then when I'm doing my little transcribing sessions or working on my vocabulary, I'll look up that track. You know, it'll be Robin Ford, Going Down Slow, 2 minutes 18 or something. Will be what I put in my pack. So I'll go back and listen to that phrase, and I'll work out how to practice that, work out how to play the lick, or at least how I think it's been played. And I'll make a little note of it. I've got a little pad where I keep records of that sort of stuff, and then I'll practice it. And I'll practice the one phrase over and over and over again, and try and figure out, like, how does it fit under my fingers? Is there anything technical going on that I need to think about picking direction, or how it feels under the fingers? Is the bending fine? Are there different parts on the neck where I might play that lick, and which one's going to feel better? Because it used to be, I used to suggest this as well. I'm sorry if you're an old student of mine, I suggested this too. This idea of like learning a lick in more than one place. It comes from a kind of a jazz thing, I think, where anytime you learned a phrase, you would learn to play it in each part of the guitar neck. But it would seem to me that nobody actually ever really does that, like in the great guitar players. Like if you want to play a particular lick, if you hear a particular phrase, you just move to the part of the neck where that phrase is a nice one to play. And I do think that by practicing phrases in particular parts of the neck, there becomes some kind of awareness between our musical imagination and the location of our hand that very rarely do I hear in my musical imagination a particular phrase that is not around where my fingers are. So that's something just to be aware of when it comes to licks. And the second part of licks, which is, I'm kind of deviating from my regular order of teaching the lessons, would be, of course, improvisation. So if you're going to do, like, break up your practice routine, you can do a little bit of time working on whatever the knowledge thing is that you're working at the moment, whether it's a scale pattern or a chord thing or a chord progression, whatever. You probably want to spend like 5 minutes on licks. It might be, if it's a complicated lick, that you're going to spend 5 minutes playing that one lick and really trying to get like the bend in tune, the rhythm of it really good, all of that sort of stuff. If it's a real simple lick, you might do 2 or 3 or 5 different licks within that 5-minute thing. But it would literally, I'd recommend you just sitting there and go, you know. Literally just the one lick over and over, and it, you know, trying to get with it, get it into your fingers and your musical imagination. A separate 5-minute thing would be improvising with the set licks that you're working on at that time, right? So this is a different, it's not just free improvising, which has value as well every now and again. But you definitely want to practice working on the phrases that you're practicing as part of your licks thing and trying to work them in with your other vocabulary. And at the beginning, you might have a limited vocabulary. You might only have a few licks, but you're going to be working on those licks, trying to put them together, use little bits of scales to kind of link them up. And then every time when you're learning new vocabulary, you practice them, just using them, improvising first of all, and then gradually connecting them with the vocabulary, the words, the licks that you've already learned before, and you start trying to mix them up all together so that it becomes a nice kind of a soup. You don't want to just chuck in your new ingredients and leave it, because then when you're spooning out your soup, you might just have a whole bunch of stuff that should have been mixed in a little bit nicer. So I think the improvising with a framework, with a purpose, okay, deliberately practicing the new licks in an improvised setting. So Those of you using already maybe some of my Jam Blues series, which is a series of blues backing tracks I made with my friend Dave. Most of them are around 5 minutes long, specifically because I recommend people do a 5-minute practice session on a particular licks in a particular key. So that's a nice way of utilizing that kind of material. So far we've talked about knowledge, licks, and improvising. Okay, so improvising can be free form, of course, and maybe one improvising session a week should be completely free form, but other times you should be specifically working on a phrase or a group of phrases and mixing those new phrases in with the things that you're practicing. So there's 3 out of the 10. How are we looking for questions, Fan? Have we got anything super exciting happening in the Q&A department?
We do have a few questions already.
Okay.
So just right off the bat, we have David asking how different this is from your old blues course where you taught different styles in the key of E.
Where I taught different styles in the key of E. I thought that my old course was in the key of A, not the key of E, but whatever. The new course is significantly different to that in that it's got a lot more elements to it at once. So the courses that I did before, like I had a blues rhythm course and a blues, I think it was called Essential Blues Lead Guitar, and then All Over Blues Lead Guitar, and then something else, making the changes or coloring the blues. So those courses are still work, and I still feel like that's a good progression. But what I found was that it led people sometimes to worrying a bit about the scales and where licks had come from, because I taught it very much like, here's the minor pentatonic, here's the blues scale, here's licks using the blues scale and that kind of thing. Whereas this new one is much more just about, well, if your hand's in this kind of part of the guitar neck, these are the phrases that you can use and explore. So I'm trying to break down that idea of boxing in, like being stuck within a particular minor pentatonic framework. I'm trying to knock that on the head straight away so that we're just thinking like, we're in this part of the guitar neck, we're in this key, here's a whole bunch of licks that sound good. And you will find sometimes one lick will sound slightly better in a certain place than the other one, but you learn that by experience, by jamming it, by playing it over and over again. Your musical imagination will figure out that these phrases work better in some parts of the neck than others. So on a licks level, it's different in that way. But the biggest difference with this coming course is like the immersive nature of the whole thing, because we're not just looking at licks, we're looking at licks and rhythm, but importantly, history, context, different chord progressions, blues standards, like where do you put those, the licks and phrases in with it all together. And an important part of it is the listening part of it, which we're going to talk a little bit more about as we go on with as part of your practice. Is this immersing yourself in the music and really trying to, like if you were learning French, you can spend a lot of time learning French at school and looking at the books and learning the phrases and practicing your phrases, but nothing is as effective as going there where you're hearing it and you're around it all the time. So one of the things that I want people to try and really get into, the people that sign up for this course next year, is like, I'm going to listen for the next 6 months. I'm going to be focusing on my blues guitar, and I'm going to be really filling my musical imagination with the sounds of the blues. And we're kind of listening to it historically from the very early blues. So looking at like 20s and 30s, and I think we start with 1950 and earlier, but like particularly the 20s and 30s with Robert Johnson and Big Bill Broonzy and that kind of really early stuff, taking a bit of a taster on Blind Lemon, and there's a whole heap, Blind Blake, there's a heap of really important early guitar players. It's kind of country blues, and it's kind of hard listening sometimes. Well, at least for me. I think for most people, it's kind of a bit scratchy, and it's a bit out of time sometimes. They don't adhere strictly to the bars, and so it can be a little bit difficult. But there's some really beautiful, beautiful stuff in there. So part of this course is that I've made up some playlists of each of the different styles and eras with the important recordings by the right players, so that you can really absorb yourself in just the quality stuff of that. Because if you go listen to Blind Lemon Jefferson's a good example. There's like, a lot of it's really scratchy and just, it's beautiful music. And I'm not trying to, knock down the music in any way, but I find it difficult to listen to. So I assume other people will as well. So I've tried to just pick out like the standout tracks from each of the artists so that you can really not be put off listening to that sort of stuff. And then obviously we're getting into the 50s and 60s. So we've got loads of Chuck Berry, and then we've got the whole Memphis singer, the Three Kings. And going through it that way and just sort of like really listening to the way the vocabulary developed and understanding the movement of the lyrics and the movement of people, which I think, again, like studying a bit of the history of things as well and understanding the social changes and the way that, you know, in the Great Migration, in the 40s, a lot of people from the South moved north. So you got people like Robert Johnson moving from Mississippi and from the Delta out to, you know, up to Chicago, and there being like that influencing a whole load of people, and people moving out to Texas and then California. And so the kind of the spread of the blues and the vocabulary and the performers. So I think it's a really, yeah, I think it's just really useful to see, to appreciate the music. I feel like having an understanding of the history and the players and the lives that they had, and that whole thing. It makes the music and the language make more sense. That's how I feel about it, and I feel pretty confident that most people, when they look at the music in that way and they really get themselves into that sort of a place, that it changes things. It changes how all the music's stored, and I don't know, just understanding for me, like you know, I've been big the last, well, a month ago now, just coming off the tail of it, I got really into Robert Johnson and reading about his history. I read a few different books and really dug into the music and how it was working and who it was influenced by and who he influenced, and how, you know, his place within all of that, the myth, and how much of the myth was real and all of that sort of stuff. And it's really changed the way that I hear the music. So the way it's in my musical imagination is different now, having studied the history. So that's, yeah, it's very, very different to the previous courses, but it's not like the other ones don't work. It's just a slightly more rounded and complete journey into the blues. So good question. I'm going to talk a little bit more about a couple of the practice items. So far, just to recap, we talked about the knowledge, knowing things, scales, chords, etc. Licks, vocabulary. Most important thing if you're going to learn blues. If you want to learn blues, you've got to learn licks. If you don't want to learn licks, you ain't going to be speaking the language. It's not going to make any sense. Improvising, practicing using the licks that you've learned and putting them into a context so you can actually make music with them. Super important as well. Other things that we cover, other areas that I think are a big deal. Technique. So I feel like a lot of times when people are thinking about technique, they think about whittler. They think about people playing really fast and doing technical stuff. But actually, technique is pretty important, even if you don't want to play whittly stuff. Being able to play a good note so that when you play a note, it sounds good, that it's not muffled or rattly or scratchy because you didn't quite get your finger in the right spot, or your pick synchronization is off, like the way that your both hands need to play the same note at the same time. You don't want to be this finger going down slightly later than the pick because the note don't come out nice. Bending in tune. Making sure that you mute at the top of a bend, these kind of things. Learning the blues curl. So, you know, there's a... That's really important. It's not... And it's not... It's like this little... It's a bit more than a quarter of a tone, but it's just like this little bend. So... It's loads of kind of technical things, or this slides getting all of these little. There's lots of kind of quite blues specific technical things. Mostly blues, mostly bends. I meant to say not blues. Bends, curls, which are these little quarter tone bends. Vibrato, because there's lots of different types of vibrato as well. There's different players that used vibrato in different ways, so exploring that. Slides and rakes, also really important, getting this kind of... Again, it's getting this, that little... Really having the, you know, being able to hit pretty hard and hit some muted strings into the note. These are the kind of technical things that I think if you want to play blues, it really helps to isolate the different things. Again, when you're practicing, when you're working on your licks, you're probably working on some of those things as well. You're going to be working on getting your bends in tune or getting your curl on, or these, making sure the notes sound good when you're doing your individual lick practice. But it also helps to recognize the areas that you need to work on technically. So remember, this kind of technique, we're talking physical things. How does my hand sit? Is my hand at a good angle when I'm doing the bend? What exactly is going on when we're doing a curl? How do we mute the note at the top? So there's lots of kind of little subtle technical things that can make a big difference, because it's, again, I often say that it's better to do simple things well than complicated things badly, right? I don't know, most of you have probably been to an open mic, right? And when you see somebody who's like doing something that's really technical, but they don't quite pull it off, it's like, yeah, okay, like maybe you should have given that a bit more at home first, Whereas somebody who can play something that's simple but does a really good job, it's like, yeah, this is cool. Like you feel it. It's happening because they can relax into the music. They're not all tense with it, and so that feeling and the positivity and the confidence comes through the music, and we feel that. So when it comes to developing technique, you want to be confident and good at those simple things, because doing simple things really well is much more useful and more musical than doing complicated things badly. So technique that's a pretty big deal. On top of that, rhythm. So rhythm is at least 50%, if not more. And particularly when you're thinking about like not playing so much and you're not doing complicated things, the rhythm of what you do needs to be really good. And blues particularly, it's like a feel thing. So it's it's a little different to the playing things perfectly with the metronome idea. You can be a little freer, but it still needs to be in time and it needs to feel good. So you need to work on your rhythm and stuff feeling really nice. Really good. I hope you won't mind me name dropping this stuff, but a friend of mine has worked with a little bit. He's a friend of mine. He's a better friend of a friend of mine, but he plays some rhythm guitar with Status Quo a little bit. And he was talking about the difference when those guys do like a shuffle, because they do it and have done it for 30, 40 years. They've been doing, there's a... Now, it's pretty simple. I can do it. But if I was doing that at a concert for 2 hours every night, 5 nights a week for 30, 40 years, I'm going to be so damn good at that thing that there'll be another level that right now I won't even recognize what it was. I'd recognize when I heard it. I'd be like, yeah, somebody's really practiced that. So rhythm becomes a really, really important thing of practicing it, making it feel good, doing those same things over and over. I often think of things like the chunka blues, doing that like really well is a lot harder than you might think. A lot of people learn it in the beginner course and be like, oh yeah, I've learned that, done. But that's something to do it really well.
Hey guys, I think we have a little bit of a tech issue. It won't be too long, okay?
Hello, everyone. I'm back. Um, is Fan still here? Lorraine still here? Okay. I'm co-host. Sorry about this, guys. I have no idea what happened then, or even if this is still working properly. Uh, where's the chat? There's chat. Okay. I'm chatting as a guest. Why am I chatting as a guest? I don't want to be chatting as a guest. Uh, okay. What's going on? Okay. We're back. I have no idea what happened, but somebody needs to tell me what I was waffling about when it stopped because I was like, oh yeah, this is, and then I looked down. I'm like, yeah, the Zoom's not on the screen. That's kind of weird. Why is the Zoom not there? I started looking around and realized that something had gone very wrong. So I'm really sorry about that. Thank you for bearing with me. Um, Fan, if are you still around?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Fan, if that ever happens again, just text me, call my phone, and or yeah, or call my cell phone so that I don't. Yeah,
Yes,
I don't know.
sounds good.
Yeah, I was just like, so can somebody tell me what the last thing was that I was waffling about before I disappeared?
I think you were getting into licks, but yeah.
Licks. Only it was right at the beginning of the licks. How long have I been gone for? I feel like I'm one of those strange people that are like,
It
I was
wasn't the
in a coma
licks.
and I was asleep for 25 years. Oh my God.
It was the shuffle from Quo. You were saying how good they were because they've been doing it for
Oh,
so
okay.
long.
Rhythm.
That was it.
Okay. So we got through the rhythm and stuff. Okay. Okay. So it wasn't, I thought, I was worried then that we'd gone right back to the very first thing I talked about on licks. That would have been very embarrassing. But hey ho, happens, doesn't it? Let me just get my lesson notes back again.
Yeah,
So
Justin, you just played down, down.
I played a little bit of down, down. Okay.
Yeah, everyone was rocking. Then we forgot everything you said, and we've moved on.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, that's good. So we're a bit of the way through, and I hadn't waffled too much beyond then. So that's a good thing. So waffling about, shall I just pick up where I left off, and then we'll take some questions after this next little waffle? Again, apologies for the technical glitch. No idea what happened. I will actually, and I need to remember to turn the music for musicians on, otherwise you won't hear my guitar when I start playing. Okay, I think that's that. Everything seems to be working now. So yeah, talking about status quo and Rick's having this incredible groove because he's been doing the same thing for so long. Just this one simple move. So, most of us can do that sort of shuffle, right? It's not hard. But when you do something real simple for a real long time, there's new things about it that you learn and you become really an expert in that thing. And I think that's an important concept to get if you want to play blues guitar, because it's about doing simple things well. You don't want to be just like thinking like, oh, that's easy, so you can do it once and it's like I don't have to practice it anymore. You want to keep practicing them simple things, because the more you practice them, the better you get at them. And then that's the way to develop that confidence that when you're playing something, you really, you have to think about it. You're not thinking about if I'm in tune with the band, or is the curl right, or what vibrato am I using? You don't think at all. Everything just happens. But you only get to that point of being able to do things kind of unconsciously by practicing it a lot and repeating things over and over and over again and really thinking about it. So that particular concept applies to most of the things that we might learn in the blues, but particularly with rhythm. And I can't remember if I mentioned did I talk about playing the rhythm along with recordings with no chords? Did I mention that already? No, I can see Toby in the top corner there on my little screen. Okay, and he shook his head. So one of the things a tip that I'll give you now that I think that you should try and work on if you want to get into blues guitar is playing the rhythm of the blues, but without the chords. So putting on songs with great shuffle feels, music and we're all different. We all like different bluesers. There's loads of different people, artists, and different styles of blues. So you want to find the ones that you connect with and then practice along, but without the chords. So again, you put your sound on. The way I like to do it is I adjust the volume of the guitar and the track so I can hear the guitar, but it's not so dominant that I can't hear the track, because I want to feel like I'm in the band. And then I'll literally, while the song's going on, I'll be going. It's a bit much reverb here. Let me just turn that reverb down because it's getting a bit annoying. There's still a lot of reverb on there. Oh, maybe it's on the... 1 second. I think it might be on the console. It is. There we go. Let me just mute that. There we go. No, there's still loads of reverb there. That is not what I want. Still reverb. Where is this reverb coming from? This is confusing. I've just turned it off on the 2 places where I have reverb. Or is it that one? Oh my gosh. Reverb, time, mix, off. Sorry. There's just a catastrophic amount of reverb on my sound. It's annoying me. Anyway, technology, hey? Who'd want it? Bring back valve amps. But yeah, basically, excuse the reverb. But just really trying to feel that rhythm, usually all down, 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 down. And really try and get that feeling like you're in the band. Because you need to be like right with it. Not like close, but like right with it, right on. So try and pick a tune that you like the feel of, one that you listen to that makes you feel good, and then try and cop that rhythm. Even if it's a song that you know, where you know the chords, by taking the chords away will help you focus on just the rhythm. And then when you go back to adding the chords, the rhythm will feel more confident, right? Nice little hint, works really well. It's very easy. You can do it at any stage if you're learning. I still do it with songs. There are certain songs that I've got like a playlist of particularly acoustic songs with strumming where I just feel like the time feel is just amazing and I love playing them. The Weight by The Band, Get a Load Off Fanny, that one, that's Fanny here. That tune, particularly the live one from The Last Waltz, it's got such a beautiful feel. It's just so laid back and cool. I love just playing along with the rhythm of it. I really enjoy it. When I'm playing drums, I'm learning drums. I'm pretty rough still, well, very rough. But that's one of the songs that I love playing along with just because it's helping me absorb that time feel and really getting into the mode. So you definitely want to be checking that out. So we talked about rhythm. We talked about improvising, jamming. Okay. And then we're into the fun stuff. So probably the biggest thing that people don't do that they should do is transcribing. Now, most people that have tried transcribing and found it really difficult have found it difficult because the learning curve when you start is really steep. Because you go along from like, I don't know this song to like trying to hear what's going on. It's like a cliff. Because you don't know the key, you don't know the phrases, you don't know the licks, you don't know what's going on. It's like there are so many possibilities. But one of the way that I teach transcribing on this course is I teach you words and phrases first of all. So we're learning the licks. And then I get you to transcribe the solo that's using the licks. And that teaches you this idea of hearing the words to transcribe rather than always looking for the letters. Because trying to pick each note of the letters can be a little bit complicated. And everyone plays the licks a little different. But if you start to recognize the words, you will hear, if you're transcribing an Albert King solo and you get, you know, a half a dozen Albert King words, when you listen to Eric Clapton, you'll hear the words. You won't have to be thinking about trying, like, what positions are in or whatever, because you'll know, oh, that's that lick. That's that word. I recognize that word. That's that. So you kind of get a head start on the transcribing. Instead of thinking like always at the minutiae, you can start to listen to the language of the blues and start to recognize the bigger phrases. It's a lot easier. So that's another pretty new methodology that I've started using. I think it's a pretty effective way of getting into transcribing. And there is more to it than that. There's more detail, and I don't want to dress it up and say it's super easy, but it's definitely easier than previously, where you just might grab it and try and listen to something straight off without knowing anything about it. So partly what that gives you is the confidence to be able to hear stuff and be able to hear the phrases, and then it's just like linking them up together or getting into more of the detail. And again, it's one of those beautiful things where different people at different stages can take different amounts out of it. So if I'm transcribing something, the notes part is pretty basic. That's not the part that's exciting me most of the time. It's the subtle things. It's the way the bend is, where the notes finish, the phrasing and the dynamic changes, all of these kind of slightly more subtle things. And the process becomes that you're just looking for the notes to start off with. Then you think about notes and position. Then you think of notes and vibrato and position. Then you think of notes and position and vibrato and dynamic and how hard and soft things are played, and whether picking direction matters on a particular phrase. And there's all of these different levels that you can start to approach depending on where you're at on the game. So transcribing, many people try and avoid it because it's a bit tricky, and they have one go and they look at the cliff and they go, yeah, I can't do it. I can't do transcribing. My ears don't work. I'm not good enough. I'm not musical enough. I've got no natural musical ability. I don't have time to do it. They make up loads of excuses not to do it because it's a little bit hard. But it is a little bit hard, but the benefits are so good, so huge, because you're really training your musical imagination to hear those phrases. So it just accelerates everything. So if you're one of those people that's tried transcribing before and found it too hard, please have another go. Just join the course if you want to do it with this licks idea where I teach the licks and then you transcribe them. But otherwise, just working on it and just know that it's good value. It's like, a bit like, I don't know, go to the gym. I go to the gym a couple of times a week. Don't really enjoy it that much, just sitting there lifting up stuff, but the benefit that it gives me in my everyday life and other parts of my life is worth it. Is worth that little bit of discomfort going there and having that bit of a struggle. So transcribing is a little bit like that. I'll do one more, talk about something, and then we'll go back to doing some Q&A for a bit, assuming my phone doesn't, the signal doesn't just disappear. And that's standards. So one of the things, if you ever go to like a blues jam night, and I must admit, I haven't been to an open blues jam in a while now, probably 10 years, but I used to go quite a lot. There used to be this great bar called Ain't Nothing But Blues Bar. I used to go there to quite a few jam nights. There was a few in Kensington in London when I still lived in London as well. But one of the things that you're going to find is that you want to know the names of some blues standards that you can play. And you want to know what it is about each of those standards that makes them that standard. Because definitely something I've thought for a long time was that, it's a 12-bar blues. And then you just played a 12-bar blues and you did whatever you like. And you kind of can if you want to do it your own way. But you will find that if you start to dig a little bit deeper, that there are certain things that are usually played a certain way. Songs that are usually played in a particular key, that usually have a particular turnaround. They're always played with a quick change or a slow change, or there are elements about it that when you start listening to, like, and again, I'll give you an example from the first module of the course. One of the tunes that we check out, Sweet Home Chicago, originally Robert Johnson tune, but loads of people have covered that song. So there's lots of different versions of it, and when you start listening to them back to back, you start to notice that there are some things that are kind of common between them. So that means that when you go to a jam night, you're going to go, hey, I'm going to play Before You Accuse Me, and you straight away know it's probably going to be an E, it's probably going to be a quick change, you're probably not going to do the shuffle on the B chord, you're going to use like a B7, and it's got a very specific turnaround that you're going to probably play if you're doing that kind of a tune. So the way we approach it in the course, we're doing 2 standards a month, so it's a 6-month course. By the end of it, you've got 12 standards. It's a pretty decent repertoire. Of course, we all like different songs, so these are what I'm offering you as suggestions. But again, the methodology is as important as the tunes themselves. The idea of, like, find a tune that you really like, a blues tune, listen to loads of different versions of it, look for the elements that remain the same, particularly when you look at, like, the blues masters. If there's somebody if Muddy Waters has done a cover of a Robert Johnson song, then probably the two of them have sorted out already the most important things, and nearly everyone will have copied the most basic elements from those particular guys. There are some where you see there's been a direct change. I'm trying to think of what the tune is. It was originally Little Richard did the song. Now I can't think of what the song is. I'm going to have to look it up because it's going to irk me if I don't remember. And a few people did covers of the song in a different key, and as soon as they did it in a different key, you could tell where people came from with the chant. Is it Kansas City? Yeah. So Kansas City, the song. The original versions were all in the key of C. No, sorry. The original one, the Little Richard one, was in the key of G. The Beatles did a version in the key of G. But everyone that was listening to the original one, which was by Little Willie Littlefield, try saying that after a few pints, they all did it in the key of C. So like the Albert King one and the Muddy Waters one, and have I got more of the list on? That's the only ones I've got on this page. But you can hear whether people learned the song from this person or that person, depending on the key that they played in. But again, it's nearly always just played in C or G. So and therefore you kind of know that if you go to a blues jam and you call a particular tune, you're kind of saying what the key is going to be as well, or what the likely key should be. So yeah, learning standards, I think, is a pretty important part of that, the whole learning the blues thing. Okay, let's have a question or two before I roll on to the last, the kind of the academic side of the blues. Fan, you got any good questions there?
We have a few questions about the guitar type. Do you need to use an electric guitar to get the best out of blues, or is acoustic just as good?
Good question. So the blues that I'll be teaching in this course is definitely aimed at electric guitar. And that's because a lot of the vocabulary for blues generally, which is most of it is electric guitar, involves the string bending stuff. And it's possible to bend on an acoustic guitar. Like if you've got good technique and you've been around for a while, you've got strong fingers, you would be able to manage it on acoustic guitar. But it's significantly physically more difficult to do it on an acoustic guitar. So if you want to get into like acoustic blues, generally speaking, acoustic blues is the kind of blues where you're playing it all on your own. So like, or in a band like a la Eric Clapton, these sort of stuff. But most of the tunes on the Unplugged thing, again, are older style bluesers, where it's hailing much more toward Big Bill Broonzy and Robert Johnson, this kind of style where you're playing, either a resonator or a little parlor acoustic, and you're playing a rhythm part and a lead part at the same time, and you're thumping along, probably got a thumb pick on. That kind of thing is more common on acoustic guitar for blues. And for me, when I think of like immersing myself in the blues, just that acoustic part is too small a piece of that whole thing. We will talk a little bit about that style in the first module. We're talking about early blues. I don't teach too many of the phrases again from that, specifically from the earliest blues. You do hear some key elements of the vocabulary that grew, but it's kind of in the early stages, kind of country blues, which is a different set of vocabulary. It's kind of slightly jazzier than you'd think. It didn't start as simple. It started slightly more complicated, got simple again, and then gradually got complicated over the decades. So it's a super interesting form to look at. But no, the specifically to do with my course, the one for next year, this blues immersion, it's going to be, I would recommend that you do it on electric guitar. If you really wanted to, you could try it on acoustic guitar, but it would be significantly harder. And I think that it's a good idea to learn electric blues if you want to play blues. Even if you want to play acoustic blues, partly because some of those techniques like string bending, if you try and learn it on acoustic guitar, you're prone to learning a bad technique or allowing a bad technique to develop. Where if you learn it on electric guitar and develop a good technique, you can then transfer it to acoustic guitar a little easier. Not, I wouldn't say easy full stop, but easier, definitely. Yeah, very good question. Okay, Fan, any other questions? What have we got?
We have a lot of technical questions regarding licks. I don't know if that's something that you want to address later.
Okay. Yeah, we can jump into some licks questions.
Okay, and if any of the participants that ask questions, if you want to ask directly, just lift your hand up and I'll unmute you. So
So by
Sean,
lifting your hand up doesn't mean like lift your hand up physically in the thing.
I
That would
mean-
be pretty funny. There's a button on the bottom of your screen. I can't remember where it's in. Is it in reactions or is it in more?
it's in reactions, I think. Oh no, it's not. It's not.
Where is it? I know I can't find it myself. Oh, it's for me it's in more and it says raise hand.
Hey guys, yeah.
Yeah, it's just above Q&A for me. Maybe it is going to be for you. So if you want to raise your hand.
Oh, David has his hand.
Okay, David.
Hey, David.
There we go. How you doing, dude? Oh, hang on. So can David unmute
Yeah.
himself? Yeah, there we
Yeah,
go.
I muted myself.
How you doing?
For me, it was under reactions, but my question for Licks is when you start to learn kind of different stuff about Cage and where different notes are, I struggle with like when I play something like Before You Accuse Me, there's like 2 or 3 licks in open position, but then my mind says, oh, you should slide to the E on the 5th fret, or you should slide to the 12th fret. And then I just get myself lost in what lick should I play? And should I keep it simple or show how much I know? And then I just get myself all kind of twisted and like, oh crap, I have to play rhythm again.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know what advice you have for that.
Okay, so there's like that's really good. There's a few questions within that thing. So when we come into the Cage thing, there are 5 patterns, 5 areas of the guitar, and it's a lot of people used to try and sell the Cage system like you could buy it as their invention, but it's just the way the guitar works is that all of the chord shapes fall into these 5 areas of the guitar to do with where the root notes are and where the rest of any particular scale falls relative to those root notes. So if you're playing Before You Accuse Me, which is commonly played in the key of E, let me flick over to my close-up cam because I haven't even used that today. Yep. So you're playing Before You Accuse Me here. Look at yourself. Before you accuse me, just a standard blues. Take a look at yourself. You say you spend your money on other women. You take your money from someone else. So you got that. That's your basic 12-bar blues in the key of E. And when it came to doing a solo there, you got a few different options. So you might be thinking, well, here's E open position. So you might be thinking, Now, for most people, this kind of the root position, like with the root note on the E, the same as our minor pentatonic, like that's the first call. For me, if I was playing that tune, I'd be looking at the next position up almost straight away. Playing those open string licks is okay, but I feel like it's really limited, and it's something that I still work on a little bit, but I just feel like there's other positions that feel more comfortable for me. And that's not saying it should for you, but there's options there. So for me, having this position where the root note's here, that for me is going to feel... Now, something that some of you might notice, I'm playing in that position on the thinnest 3 strings, but as soon as I go onto those lower strings, I'm moving back a position. That's okay. That's what I naturally do. Most of the licks and phrases that I know in that particular pattern 2, the one of D shape, whatever, will be based around those thinnest 3, sometimes the 4th string. That's not a bad thing. A lot of people feel like they have to use the whole of every position, but you just use the ones where the licks fit that you want to play. And again, you should have licks in every position. It's something that the way that we're doing it in the course next year is learning one position at a time, moving gradually up the neck, starting in box 1, which most people would be familiar with box 1 licks already, but then looking at box 2, then learning, like mixing up that box 1 and 2 together, then lick pattern 3, much like I did in the Blues All Over lesson series. So that's that position. But then you've got here. So. So there's another position there, and so on. You should be able to play and have licks and vocabulary in each one of those patterns. A couple of little bits there went a little bit wonky, because sometimes when I'm deliberately trying to force a vocabulary, it gets a little bit difficult, and I sometimes fall off my skateboard, but it doesn't matter, right? So, but having phrases and licks in each part of the guitar neck, in each one of those 5 caged shapes, I wouldn't even worry about thinking of it as cage shapes. I tend to think of box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4, box 5, and then it goes back to box 1 again. So I think that's the first part of that David's question there, was figuring out vocabulary in each one of the boxes. But the next part was like, oh, well, what am I going to play? Am I going to play something? Am I going to show off what I know, or am I going to play something simple or whatever? Those kind of things are the things where I don't like to think about it too much, because I think that the thinking is not where the good stuff lives. The real point is, if you're trying to think, if you're trying to express yourself and do something creative, it's kind of just flowing, and that's what you're looking for. Now, again, there's a difference here between what you're practicing to do and when you're actually doing it. And at the beginning, the actual doing it is very difficult. If you've only been playing guitar for a few years and you've learned a few licks or whatever, expecting yourself to suddenly be able to let go of all of that stuff and really improvise and rely completely on your musical imagination is not going to happen. Frankly, it's just that maybe it might for a few freaky people, but for most people it doesn't. You have to keep practicing that stuff, and you have to, the more you do it and the more fluent you get and the more natural you get, when it comes to playing, you just don't think. I don't think at all when I'm improvising. Like at the start of the video, I just made some stuff up. I literally was like, I'm going to play a blues in A. I had nothing more in my mind than I'm going to play a blues in A. That was it. Or everything I played was just following my nose and just trying to find a little thing that made me interested, and then follow that little journey for a little bit. And that's Stevie Ray Vaughan in an interview talks about the thread. So like when you've got a lick and then you're going on to another lick and you're just following the thread around. And it doesn't even matter if people can hear the thread or they know what the thread is. As long as you know what the thread is and you're able to follow that little path, that can make everything that you play kind of have a type of cohesion that might not be immediately obvious, but what it is, but people will feel that it's there. So yeah, learn licks in every position. I wouldn't worry about trying whether you're going to try and do a particular thing or not. The aim is to just let it happen. At the very beginning, you will have to think about licks, and you will have to think like, okay, I'm going to have this gap and I'm going to practice doing that lick. So you might deliberately do like a bar and then do a lick and then go back to playing some rhythm, particularly if you're working on moving between rhythm and lead. We talked about that in one of these previous things. I think it was called the Blues on Your Own one, if you haven't been following along with the whole series. In that series I talked about, or in that live session I talked about this idea of playing a bit of rhythm and then doing a very specific lead and then back to the rhythm and back to the lead, keeping it real simple, just playing notes and then gradually building it up. So, but I think that's the right, yeah, that's how that works. Okay. Okay, there's a couple of hands up. Fan, do you want to pick somebody there. I can't see the names on my screen there now. I see a big acoustic guitar there and a hat, a beard. Who's that? Actually, and I see the other one of several acoustic guitars. Who? Yeah. Okay, Waver, just unmute yourself and ask it. Go for your question.
Yes, hello, Justin. Hello,
There we
everybody.
go. How you doing?
Excellent, excellent. I've got a quick question here. I've been listening to a lot of blues over the last little bit, and I've noticed something. I don't know if it's something you had mentioned before. I think maybe it was in one of your previous sessions that they seem to hit on the one beat like almost dead all the time, and then second, third beat, it's like they can flow through from one spot to the other, move down a little bit. So as long as they're on that one beat or three beat or something like that, things kind of flow. Am I right in thinking that way?
Yes. The danger where that you're going there is overthinking the rhythm. So I'm trying to think where do I go with this? How do I explain this one? So here's a good example, and this is pretty far from blues, but if you've never listened to Dr. Dre before, you should check it out just to have experienced the amazing grooves that the guy creates. So like a lot of it's pretty, if you don't like things like the N-word, like not that I like the N-word, that's a bad example, but it's like the music can be pretty offensive, but what he starts with is a template of like doof, gaff, exactly like metronomic. But then he moves the beats around, just tweaks them a little bit. And I had a friend who, I can't remember whether he worked in the studio with him or worked in a studio near him, but he got to watch some of the process. And basically he would just like tweak things a little bit, like move a snare drum just a little bit late, or the kick drum a little bit late, or just playing with the rhythms of things, just a tiny little bit. And suddenly you just feel it. And if you listen to Eminem, you do, or Dr. Dre, who was the producer for a lot of the Eminem stuff, you feel this like, wow, it sits real groovy. And the reason I mention him rather than just a blues thing is that it's electronic music that's been distinctly and purposefully altered away from the metronomic, mathematical correct beat. Because if you listen to music that's mathematically correct every time, it does feel a little cold. There's some sort of humanness that's been removed. It might be fine if you've taken a load of MDMA and you're in a dance club and it's all like all of that stuff. That might work in some of those styles. But for most people, most of the time, it just doesn't sit well. So when it comes to the blues thing, if you're trying to think of like, oh, we're hitting it, landing definitely on beat one and then the other ones are a little bit out, I think that you're in danger of overthinking the process, overthinking a process that you would find easier if you just played along and listened. And interestingly, I just recorded today a shuffle groove that I recorded on last week with my friend Dave Marks on bass and Darby Todd, fantastic drummer. And we just did this little session recording some backing tracks for the course. And one of them was a 12-bar shuffle in the key of A. For you guys, that when you sign up for the course, you get this access to this little kind of preparation series. And one of them is literally doing that. And we made this backing track. And on the backing track, I put chips in. So I'm just going 1, 2, 3, 4. Little chips on 2 and 4. Super simple. And I just happened to have the Logic session open, and the way that the session was open was showing 2 bars at a time. And I could clearly see like the waveform of my chip against the snare drum and the bass being played on beats 2 and 4. And I wavered a little bit, but I was generally fairly consistent. And like a lot of them were like bang on. I was like, I got my timing good. But interestingly, the beat was often early. And that's where I wanted to make this distinction here about like calculating it, because in that particular thing, and we played it to a click track because we wanted to make sure that the tempo was super consistent, right? So we all had headphones on, and the recording software, the DAW, was playing a click through our ears, mostly to Darby, to be honest. Like I don't actually remember being able to hear the click, but as long as Darby had the click, he was playing it in time and we were playing in time with him. But when I look at it in the computer program where it shows me the bar lines, I'd say a quarter of the bars, beat 1 is early than 1, comes sooner. So that kind of makes the feeling like the rest of them are late, but they're not, right? The beat 1 was early. But I wouldn't have known that or cared about that. I just happened to notice it when I was editing this thing. So like, I don't think that the important thing would be thinking about that, but definitely understanding that it's not mathematically, it's not the maths, it's not set. It definitely moves. But really good question. But I would encourage you to feel it more and do this playing along without any chords. That will teach you the right stuff more than trying to think like how many milliseconds the snare drum's been moved back, or that kind of thing. That would be my advice. Good question. Thank you. There was another dude with his hand up and he just completely disappeared off my little screen there. Okay. And now he's back again. The hand has been raised again. What's your name, sir? There we go.
Yeah. Are you there, Justin?
Yeah, there you are. I can hear you. How you doing? What's your name?
Yeah. My name's Heck.
Hey, how you doing, man? You good?
Heck, yeah. Justin, I think I've sort of practiced permanent 30 years ago. I seem to have in the minor pentatonic scale, I seem to have 2 additional notes, one being on the 5th string and one being on the 2nd string.
Okay.
It sounds all right when I play it. I learned it a lot of years ago. But now I look at yours, because I'm following your sort of post at the moment. I'm just unsure whether to drop them 2 notes or keep on with them.
Okay, good. I'm assuming that the note that you've added on the 5th string will be the blue note. Is it the note with the 2nd finger?
It is, So on the 5th string, it's you've got your 1st and then your 4th. Sorry, your 1st and then your 3rd.
Yeah.
The way I was taught it, your 2nd finger falls in there.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
And on the 2nd string, my 1st finger, and then my 3rd, and then my 4th falls in.
Okay. So all that you've done is learned a couple of the additional, some people call them color tones. So and I wouldn't relearn it. Just think of the scale as the alphabet, and this is really important. That the practicing scales is not something you want to spend most of your time on. There is some benefit to practicing scales, but it's not for the improvisation. It's not for the language. You think if you went to France, if you're going on holiday to France for the first time, you never spoken French before, you wouldn't sit at home practicing the French alphabet.
No.
Right? You wouldn't. You'd learn please, thank you, hello, where's the toilet, whatever. Like, is there a seat free in the restaurant, or phrases that you could communicate with. So if I went to let's say I went to a blues jam and it came to my turn to solo and I went, I didn't play any bad notes, but it wasn't very inspiring. I don't think it said very much. Whereas if I went on and my first thing that I played was, says a lot more, right?
Yeah.
Just having a few phrases. So, I think it's the biggest mistake. And I made the same mistake, right? There was no one around to tell me this when I was a kid. I wish there was, because I spent God knows how many hours of my life practicing scales up and down. And I was definitely guilty of being that guy where when it was my turn to solo, I'd play scales up and down because that's what I practiced.
Yeah.
Whereas if somebody had said, hey, man, just rip on these 5 licks and play them over and over again, it would have made much more musical sense. You'd be expressing something, and people recognize that you're playing a particular style. The same as if you think like, this is an interesting little example as well. So minor pentatonic. If I go sounds bluesy. If I went, it's got a kind of more of a country kind of thing. If I went, whatever, it's suddenly got a bit more of a jazz
Yeah.
thing. If I start using these, it's got a slightly jazzier kind of a flavor to it. So within the same language, and I'm kind of I'm pushing this analogy a little bit extreme, but with the same alphabet you can speak English, French and German, but the words that you use that make people go, oh, you're speaking blues, you know, whatever language you're speaking, the words are different, but the alphabet stays the same.
Yeah.
So this is where it becomes this interesting, I think the analogy is pretty strong in that respect. So I would encourage you to not worry so much about extra notes that you've learned, and just don't even think about unlearning it or relearning it, or just pay no heed to it, and just focus your attention then on learning licks that are born of the alphabet.
Yeah.
That would be my advice. So
Spot
good
on.
question.
Champion. Thank you.
Thank you, dude. Okay, there's another chap there next on my screen. Yeah, I think you're the only one with your hand up now. How do I show you? You got glasses on and a grey shirt.
Oscar?
I wish. Yeah, there we go. Hello,
Oscar?
sir.
Hi, Justin. Thanks.
How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
All right.
That's fine. You always emphasize that it's more important to learn the licks, the words, than to learn the scales, and I totally agree, of course. But is it the same for the arpeggios? Because knowing the keys, the chords and the keys, and to be able to improvise in a free way, not only with the licks, of course. I have to know the chords in the key, and to improvise, I know the dominant major arpeggio or the whatever arpeggio fits over the keys, with it's major or minor as well, or diminished, and so I understand that it's more important to learn the licks, to have the words, and to assemble the words that you get a new poem. But what's about the arpeggios? Is it even not so important, or is it important but in a later stage?
This is a great question. So if you think of an arpeggio is for those of you not familiar, an arpeggio is the notes of a chord played one at a time. So if let's go to close-up cam again. If we take say an A7 arpeggio, this is the A7 chord, and it's the notes A, C sharp, E, G, A, C sharp, E, G, A. Now, if we were just thinking of like improvising with the arpeggio over a blues, we could play just arpeggio tones. So this would be A to D7, A to D, A, E, D, A. Now, I started doing it just halfway through anyway, but you can play just arpeggio tones, but it sounds very kind of dry. It sounds a little bit jazzy, beboppy, especially if you play even eighths. Now, I learned to do that. I learned arpeggios. And interestingly, I never learned arpeggios in a blues. I learned arpeggios learning jazz because I really wanted to play jazz. And the only way really in blues, you get used to this idea of there being a key. So we're in the key of A, and we've got all of these licks in the key of A, and we blast through all of our licks in the key of A and chuck them around wherever we like, and it's all groovy. And that kind of works to a certain point. But there definitely comes a point in the journey where you start wanting to reflect what is being played by the rest of the band. And it's a pretty big moment when that happens for you, because the difference will be when you're playing licks and you're thinking, oh, I'm in the key of A and I'm just thinking A and I've got my licks and I've got my phrases, everything's about me and you're thinking about yourself all the time. When you expand to thinking about the effect that you're having on the rest of the music, because remember, when somebody's listening to you playing in a band, they don't hear just you. They hear you and everything else. So as soon as that happens and you start to become aware of what the rest of the band are playing, what chords they're playing, it's likely to affect what you play as well. Now, in jazz, quite often people play arpeggios, and that's primarily because things move a lot faster. So if you're playing C, A, D, G7, you're thinking C, if I can even do it, C, A, D, G, C, A, no, C, the chords are moving so fast that you only get this very tiny amount of time to be able to reflect or improvise or pull out some notes from the chords that are happening. And there's likely to be a lot of key changes, so the note choices you got are more limited as well. In the blues, we don't have that problem. The chord changes are often a lot slower, so you get a little bit more time. But what I feel like is a better approach, again, for learning arpeggios, to learn licks within the arpeggios, and then you're moving between those licks. So this is the way I play most of the time, is doing that. I very rarely play just the licks. So if I'm playing a blues in A, and that's the first chord, I'm probably going to outline it by doing something around that C sharp. So I might go, I'm much more likely to target that note as part of the chord than I would be. I'm going to do those kind of licks. There's another C sharp there. I might go, that C sharp. And then when the chord changes to D, I'm not going to go, I mean, I can, I just wouldn't want to. I might go, so now I'm playing, that's the arpeggio, but I might, because I'm highlighting the chord tones, but with a lick, or. So these are all outlining the D. Now I might do it there, or I might, if I'm in this part playing on the A, minor pentatonic things here, or dominant. And then it moves to D. There's my D. So I might go. And then back to A. Then to E. Now just even a lick like that. This is an E arpeggio. That's the E. But I can go. This is outlining the E. So you can hear. You can hear the da 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 da. A, D, A, D. So the answer to your question is arpeggios do become important, but they're not important in terms of like running up and down arpeggios, because running up and down arpeggios is the same problem as running up and down scales. It sounds like you're running up and down arpeggios or running up and down scales. What you want is to find the licks within the arpeggio shape. So you're still thinking, I'm thinking A7 in my mind, rather than just like A minor pentatonic. I'm thinking the chords, the band's playing A, so I'm thinking like A7 arpeggios. But instead of playing the arpeggios up and down, I'm thinking of the licks that I know that come out of the A7 arpeggio. Does that make sense?
Definitely makes sense. And did I get it right? So to train it, to exercise it, to get the right licks out of the arpeggio tones for a blues in A, and to train those kind of licks which use and emphasize the chord tones
Exactly.
and the arpeggio.
Exactly.
Okay.
Perfect.
Then
Perfect.
hopefully it gets into the mind and comes
Exactly.
out of automatically. Okay.
Absolutely. One thing that you find that's really interesting when you start getting into that realm, it's a slightly more advanced things. If you're new to blues guitar and this is all like, whoa, hang on, what's going on? Don't worry about it. Don't be in a hurry to get there. You need to learn how to play with the minor pentatonic and you know, those kind of basic licks without changing the key and not worrying about any of that stuff first. But when you get to this and you're thinking about chord tones and what harmonies are going on, you start to find that the really great guitar players, whether it's Eric Clapton or B.B. King or Albert King, whatever, they tend to use the right chord tones from the minor pentatonic scale. So they're not even, they're not using any more fancy notes or chords or notes that are unique to a particular arpeggio. Their ears have told them which are the right notes from the minor pentatonic scale or the blues scale or the blues hybrid scale, but their ears are telling them these are the best notes to land on. So they hit chord tones nearly all the time, but I don't think they're deliberately doing it from a theory or maths perspective. It's kind of interesting. Check that out too. Okay, I've run massively over again, so I'm gonna have to finish soon because it's nearly my bedtime. So yeah, very busy day tomorrow. I really hope you enjoyed this one. This is the last of the blues series. What I would like you to do though, between now and next